that the average person takes about 17,000 to 30,000 breaths every day. We take even more when we're active. And yet I wonder that over the course of your day, how many of those breaths do you even notice that you're taking? We are surrounded by air, and we need it to survive. Yet when we're healthy, we scarcely even notice that we're breathing in. And yet, the fact that we don't notice our breathing doesn't mean that the air is any less real. The air exists all around us, whether we notice it or not. Bruxy Cavey, in his book, The End of Religion, says that God's loving presence is like air that surrounds us. It's the atmosphere that we live in. We simply need to stop holding our breath. What would it look like if you stopped holding your breath to God's presence? If you started to realize that He is around you and wants to be connected to you, we just simply need to attune ourselves to His presence. The psalmist in Psalm 139 asks, "Where can I go from your spirit? Where can I flee from your presence?" And as he continues to write and reflect, he concludes that there is no place on this earth that he can go where God's presence isn't. God is present in your life that way too. There is no place that you can go where He isn't, where you can connect with Him and you can meet Him. What does it even look like, though, to recognize God's presence around us? How do we see Him? In the Bible, in the book of 1 John chapter 4, verse 7, God is described as love. So when we see evidence of love all around us, when we see things that are beautiful and loving and just and kind and compassionate, we can see evidence of God's fingerprints all through His world and in our lives. When we look to the life of Jesus and we see what His life and character reflects, and we see evidence that reflects Jesus' life around us, that's when we see evidence of God in our world. Have you ever noticed that when you get a new vehicle, you suddenly start to see more of those vehicles all around you? Now, it's not that those vehicles suddenly multiplied and there's a whole bunch of them. But what happened is that as you have that vehicle, you start to look for all the other ones that were there. And you notice something that had always existed, but now you're especially attuned to it. God's presence in our life is like that too. Once we start to be aware of it, we start to see it more frequently, and we start to connect with Him more regularly. But how do we do that? One way is for us to start intentionally giving thanks to God when we see evidence of beauty and kindness and love. When we see things like a gorgeous sunset, when we hear birds chirping, when we hear the laughter of a child, we can stop and say thank you to God as the source of those loving and beautiful things. We can acknowledge His presence with us. We can also set intentional times in our day to reflect back and to see where God has been present. We can perhaps at the end of our day look back and point out the times where God has been there, and again to give thanks to Him for His presence. C.S. Lewis wrote that we may ignore, but we can nowhere evade the presence of God. The world is crowded with Him. He walks everywhere incognito. Where are you noticing the presence of God in your life? I encourage you this week to take note of His presence all around you, because He is there just as the air we breathe is there. And we can learn by practicing the awareness of His presence to be attuned to Him and to notice where He is working. And that can bring you such joy and peace and comfort as you become aware of His guidance and His love that surrounds you.